Let's go.
Let's go.
Oh, do you want to?
Sorry. I'll let you.
Next one.
I'm excited and I feel relaxed and I'm ready to party. Let's say sorry. You don't need to do that. You don't need to apologize. It's a fucked up female habit. You don't need to be sorry for anything ever.
Can you guess what every woman's worst nightmare is?
I don't have razor suits.
I have nothing to prove to you.
When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
I say when it comes to stardom and Lauren, there are no accidents.
Hi, Karen Peterson.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Citizen Dame, the podcast where we ask very important questions. I am Lauren Humphries Brooks, and with me, as always, is Karen Peterson. Hello, Karen.
Hello.
And I have one question for you, Karen. Just one.
Yes.
This is the only question I'm going to ask. All right. Which of the Pickwick triplets did it?
That's a really great question, Lauren. I mean, Penelope and Pink sure is making quite a stink.
I wish I could remember all the lyrics.
I might have them pulled up on my screen right now.
I think Patrick comes next.
Yes, it's Penelope and Pink, and then let's see. Preening Patrick is pernicious. With an appetite so vicious, he would bite the hand that feeds him with a sneer. And then, Paco. So they named their triplets Penelope, Patrick, and Paco.
It's an interesting mix of names there, definitely.
It is. Yeah. I'm assuming Paco is a family name.
I hope so. Yeah, because it seems like it's just like kind of the odd one out there.
Paco Pickwick.
Paco Pickwick. Patrick Pickwick, like that is Penelope is actually one of the best, one of the better names works. There. Like, Patrick Pickwick. Jesus, no wonder
Paco
these kids.
Pickwick.
No wonder these kids were like, hey, maybe we'll kill our mom.
Yeah, she gave us these names. She's gone.
Exactly. For anyone who has no idea what we're talking about, the most recent episode of Only Murders in the Building involves Steve Martin finally getting to do the full patter song of which of the Pickwick triplets did it. And even if you do not watch Only Murders in the Building, watch the clip on YouTube because it's hilarious. And I swear, this is this moment where I feel like Steve Martin was like, you have to let me do this. You have to let me go. Like, let me do this entire song.
Mm-hmm. I love in that scene watching the background actors. Because the way, like, there's this one particular girl who's supposed to be a girl that's in the cast of this show that they're putting on. And her reaction, it's like, that's natural. Like, she's really reacting to Steve Martin doing that. And it's like, she is us. She is all of us.
Uh-huh.
Love it.
Uh-huh. Well,
I actually showed that clip to a couple people yesterday. And they were like, I am going to watch the show this weekend.
It's and Steve Martin, who's been around forever, right, and has done musicals, like, and was famously in Little Shop of Horrors, and you just like, as soon as they begin introducing that, just like, you gotta let him go, just let him go.
Mm-hmm. Just let him do it, and he did it. He did the thing, and it's been like the biggest song of the week. It's great,
and I did in my fever post-vaccine. I was lying awake, just like, but which of the Pickwick triplets did it? Like, it was just running through my head. And the problem is I don't know all the lyrics. I only know the first verse, really. And then little bits and pieces from the other verses. I'm going to have to learn the entire song just to be able to go through it all.
I've been working on it because I want to learn it. It's so good.
It's hard. There's some, because like it also changes rhythm. Mm-hmm. It slows down, it speeds up. It's really impressive. Anyways, so from the ridiculous to the terrible, before we get started on our actual topic, which we did not plan this, I'm just going to say, we did not plan for these particular stories to all come out at the same time that we were doing an episode about kindergarten movies. But somehow this has happened. So just to excuse us, we did not intend to be talking about this week. Before we start,
news stories were not supposed to be part of the theme.
Yeah. So before we go into the films that we want to talk about, we do have Garbage People to discuss. I think that we cursed ourselves at some level because we said a couple weeks ago, oh, it's been great. We haven't had to do that many Garbage People, and then bam. The first one, this is not a terrible surprise, and I feel like there have been allegations kind of revolving around this guy for some time. But Russell Brand has been accused of rape, sexual assault, and emotional abuse over a 7-year period by, I think, 4 different women. One of whom said that they started a relationship when she was 16 years old and he was 31, which is not okay, is many kinds of illegal. It's the whole thing is very upsetting. I'll link the Guardian article that kind of breaks all of this down. It's not surprising, unfortunately, given Brand's public persona and given some of the things that he has said publicly about women, about sex, about, and he's always been kind of excused because he is one of those figures who is supposed to be extreme, right? You're like, oh, isn't that's just kind of his on-screen persona. And quite obviously, there's a lot of darkness underneath that. And these women have very legitimate accusations. Brand and his lawyers are, of course, denying all of this, saying, oh, this is very upsetting, but none of this is true, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so Russell Brand has been accused of quite a litany of terrible shit, basically.
Yeah.
He has claimed that all the relationships that he has had were always consensual. The women are saying that no, a lot of this stuff and some of them, they were in initially consensual relationships, but the things that he did were not consensual. And that's one of the things that in a lot of these conversations, I think we get muddled, is that being in a sexual relationship with someone does not mean that they just get to do whatever they want to at any time. That's right. Not how it works. And I think that we begin to get muddled, particularly when it comes to heterosexual relationships in particular, that this whole idea of, for a long time, you could not accuse a husband of rape because basically there was this attitude that, well, the husband owns the wife. He has a right to the wife's body. That's not how it works. That's not how relationships work. And there's been a lot of muddling of that. And it certainly seems like some of the reporting around Brand and some of the reporting around a lot of the Me Too stuff is exactly that. It's like, well, she was in a relationship with him. It's like, yeah, that doesn't mean he gets to do whatever he wants to.
Yeah. I think there's even some states that still don't even recognize rape between married people. But one of the things that makes this an extra layer of awful is this underage relationship that he was in. There's no consent there. I mean, even if she is over like the legal age of consent, she's 16 years old. Like, that just makes it extra bad. It's all bad, but that's just another level of just yeah. And I'm really glad to see that there were, as soon as the story came out, it was a kind of a joint investigation between a couple of different outlets. And as soon as this came out, he started to lose jobs as a result. So I'm glad that there were some immediate consequences. I mean, not that immediate because these cases are all a few years old, but
yeah, exactly. I mean. And you've also got a number of, like, some of the women who are talking about the issues that then result in as a part of their career, because this is a famous person, right? This is a famous man. And that some of the arguments are essentially that everybody within the entertainment industry in Britain knows about him, like knows that he is like this. And that it was, quote, an open secret in radio and TV production, and that it was difficult then for some of these women to continue to get jobs within the industry, to be worried about whether or not they would be able to get jobs if they accused him, all of that shit. And it's, I do think that we tend to get down, I think, a little bit on Me Too, because there have been some of these men who have gotten away with it, essentially. But the fact that women are feeling more comfortable and more able to come out and actually talk about this, whether or not it results in like actual criminal prosecutions or criminal indictments, it does mean that like the culture of the industry is changing, and that I hope that men like Brand are scared.
Mhm.
I've said this before, that it's a good thing if these men are scared, if they're not doing things because they realize that they actually could get caught, they could lose their jobs, et cetera, and that women are actually comfortable coming out and talking about this and warning other people as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I think this does signal also a shift, like seeing that there's this swift action now, even though this was all happening in a time when that wasn't as common. I think that's one of the biggest signals that things are changing. And we're not going to completely be able to root out this problem in the industry of these open secrets until people decide that someone like Russell Brand doesn't need to be the one that you make money off of. People's safety needs to come before a guy like him. Like, what does he offer that someone else couldn't do, and probably better with less assault,
Exactly.
And so until we get to a point where we care more about safety of people than about protecting folks, even when they're exceptionally good at what they do, until we care more about the people that are affected, then this is still going to be a problem. But there is some hope, seeing that there is a shift, and now we do see consequences. It'll remain to be seen if he stays, out of the spotlight, or if he's able to worm his way back in.
So we will link that article. It is disturbing. There are some things, it's not fully described everything that happens, but there are definitely some trigger warnings there. But we'll also link that just to for people to be able to kind of go through the accusations against Russell Brand. It reminded me actually the other day that now there are two horrible people who are involved with Death on the Nile. Like I went to see A Haunting in Venice, and I was sitting there going like, no one on this particular film has been outed as a terrible human being and possible criminal. I hope. Not so far as I know. Is
our fingers crossed. I think that's part of what, well, we're going to do a bonus episode on Haunting in Venice. Yes. And we'll talk about it more there, but maybe that's why this movie worked better.
Yes, maybe so. No actual criminals. Yeah. So again, Karen, before we move on to our topic, there was something else that you wanted to address about another garbage human being who has been recently exposed. So did you want to talk about that?
Oh, exposed is the wrong word there. But anyway.
It's difficult to talk about this.
It really is. I was just teasing you. But so this is a story that I have followed for a really long time. Anybody who considered or did go to see the movie Sound of Freedom this summer probably saw a movie with Jim Caviezel playing this guy, Tim Ballard, who started Operation Underground Railroad, which is a whole thing in itself. And like got to see this hero in action, saving children bravely from child sex trafficking, which is a very serious thing that happens in the world, and it's something that we should care about. But Operation Underground Railroad has been a questionable organization for a long time. I first heard about it in like 2016, 2017, something like that. And immediately I had some questions. Something just didn't sit right. But, he would come on like news shows and stuff and just tell these big, grand, glorious stories about, these raids where they would go in and rescue children out of these horrible situations and put them into, aftercare programs and things. And well, the earlier in the summer, when Sound of Freedom, the movie about him, came out, It became supposedly a big hit movie, but there was a lot of questions about that because people would manage to snag a ticket to a sold out show and then get there and there'd be like nobody in the audience. But then there were other screenings that were actually packed. So it was really hard to know what was really going on. But a lot of people did see this movie. And it became sort of this, if you didn't, then obviously you didn't care about human trafficking. It was a whole thing. But what happened, so this story has been unraveling for the past like week and a half, 2 weeks, where first Tim Ballard, who is a member of the Latter-day Saint Church, and I believe he lives in Utah, and there's rumors that he's poised to run for the seat Mitt Romney is leaving at the end of his term. So Mitt Romney's not running for re-election. Tim Ballard is considering running for that spot. And the Mormon Church actually came out and condemned him for morally unacceptable activity. They didn't say what those activities were. And there's been a string of Vice articles that have kind of outlined some of the things that he's done. Well, the biggest thing that happened this week is this guy who's been going in and saving children in these daring rescues from sex trafficking has actually been, harassing women and possibly committing some assaults himself. And one of the things that he's done, this has been a pretty big issue that went into a big investigation earlier this year and led to him being pushed out of the organization he started. And one of the things that he was doing was he would go into these countries to pose as a buyer for children. And that was kind of one of the ways that he would rescue them. Well, he oftentimes would bring in someone who would pose as his wife. So they'd be this husband and wife couple that were looking to buy these children. And but he would do all sorts of things to coerce these women that were supposed to be posing as his wife. So like, oh, let's shower together. Let's do this. Let's do that. And the tricky thing is, one of my friends pointed out the other day that if he was coercing them in going with him internationally on these raids for the purpose of conducting sexual activities with them, then he was trafficking the women that he was bringing with him to save children from trafficking. Mm-hmm. It's all gross. It's all terrible. He's a bad person. And I don't even know what to say other than I feel kind of a little bit like I told a lot of people so, because I just have known this guy was bad news for a long time. And the whole thing with this organization is awful, but seeing the guy who started it and who has tried to build a brand around it, of like making himself this big hero while pretending that like, oh, I'm not the hero, these children are the heroes. And it really shouldn't surprise people that this is the kind of stuff that's coming out.
Well, that's the thing so often. And here's the thing. There are a lot of people who do very good work in actually helping people who are being trafficked and do a lot of important work. But often it isn't this big flashy thing of like, we're going to go in and we're going to save these kids, right? It's people working with law enforcement, people working with sting operations within the purview of law enforcement, et cetera, to help kids who are being trafficked, to help kids who have been trafficked, and to also get the actual traffickers, because stopping kids from being trafficked isn't just about rescuing the victims, it's also about actually capturing and prosecuting the traffickers.
Right.
And
if you don't work with the local governments, then you're missing that part big time.
Yeah, exactly. So and the problem is when it comes to things like this, it's depressing, because then you're just like, well, who are the good guys, right? And I think we do want to imagine that they're like these good guys who are like, the cops aren't doing anything, so I'm going to go in and rescue people. It's a very romantic notion, but it's just not reality. And very often you look at that kind of thing and then you're like, what are you actually doing?
Right.
What is your actual behavior? And are you really saving these kids, or is there something else going on? And I think, to me, and we've talked about it before, the louder someone is an ally, and I would say that, like, just across the board, the more that someone like Ballard is an ally and is like, I'm doing all of this great stuff, the more I suspect them, because very often the true allies, the true heroes, are not the people who are standing out there shouting about what they're doing.
Right. They're just doing the work.
They're doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that has been so difficult about OUR is like he really did figure out how to tap into this group of people who want to make a difference in the world, but either don't know how or just can't. All they have is their money and their ability to, like, post things on social media to raise awareness, that kind of thing. And he's really tapped into that, this like, these people who want to make a difference in the world, who want to be involved, who want to feel like they're helping, and he's using that for his own good, for his own advancement. And that's where you get things like people saying, oh, you didn't see this movie, why do you support human trafficking? It's like, seeing a movie isn't going to fix this problem. But also, I understand people going to see it because this is something that they feel like is important. It's just really tricky. And he's very much a person that takes advantage of that. He worked in Homeland Security before he left and went and started this organization. And, like, he knows a lot about human nature and about how to rile people up and how to win them over. And he's been doing that very successfully for, 7, 8, 9 years now. And now we're starting to see the House of Cards fall down. My friend lives in Salt Lake City, and she sent me a link last night, and she said, it's really bad when KSL is against you. And KSL is the local affiliate up there for NBC that, like, they defend all kinds of stuff. And so when they are against you, like, it's over. So hopefully Tim Ballard is going to go away and never be heard from again. But yeah, I really felt like this was a story that needed to be addressed, especially because of the news surrounding the movie itself over the summer. And so I just wanted to take a minute to talk about that. But yeah.
I will also say that the FBI is currently investigating Operation Underground Railroad, and there's been accusations against the executive producer of Sound of Freedom, Paul Hutchinson, for groping a 16-year-old trafficking victim.
Oh, that's awesome!
During a 2016 operation in Mexico. So, and of course, he's denying it, but this is part of an ongoing FBI investigation.
Well, and one of the things that happens too with OUR, or at least has been happening, I don't know if they've even done any of their raids or whatever lately, but one of the things that was going on was, like, Tim Ballard was creating a demand. Like, he'd go in and place orders, and so these traffickers would go and, like, recruit kids off the street to bring to an event that he was going to do that night. Like, it's such a mess. But yeah, everybody around it, like, there's no people like that. Very, very, very rarely work in a vacuum. Like, they are surrounded by people who engage in similar activities or protect it's where there's one, there's usually more.
So it's distressing. Again, we'll link the Vice article for people to look at. Again, for somewhat triggering, depending upon nothing is particularly described in detail or anything like that, but still triggering, difficult to read, as indeed so much of this shit has been.
Yeah. And if you went and saw the Sound of Freedom movie this summer, I'm not judging you. Please don't think that I'm judging you. I just think that there's a lot that people don't know about what was really going on.
I think that, I mentioned earlier about propaganda there before we started recording, and I'm not going to go into this issue of propaganda right now, but I do think that people need to think about the narrative that's being presented, because, and this is true for all films, really. What is the perspective that the film is taking? Who are the bad guys? Who are the good guys? And how does that actually relate to reality, right? And a lot of films that do fall more into propaganda tactics really do frame the story in a very particular way. And I'm not saying that that's necessary. I haven't seen Sound of Freedom, so I'm not even going to pretend that I know what the fuck is going on in that movie. But it is something to really take note of, and is really important about actually watching films from a very critical perspective, which is not saying that you can't like them, or that you can't like support the perspective that they're taking, but, you know, really consider who is making the film, why they're making it, and what is being presented to you on the screen. Yeah. Because very rarely are the villains, you know, not villainous. And then you're kind of like, well, if you're not on the side of the good guys, then you must be on the side of the villains. Well, does the world actually work like that?
Yeah.
Who
like
are the good guys?
Yeah, like a perfect fun example, like not, well, I don't know if fun is the right word, but like lighter hearted example of what you're talking about, where it's not about like good versus evil, is the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, where where they have a very, like, the people involved in making that are the living members of Queen, who were just like, oh yeah, it was all Freddie. We went home, we left the parties with the cocaine and let him do his thing, and we went home to our families every night. And it's like, why do you feel like that's the story that you need to tell? So it's like, who's telling it, and why are they letting certain parts of the story be told, and what are they avoiding telling you about?
Yeah, particularly when you're talking about, and this is what Sound of Freedom is, when you're talking about something that is based on real events, is based on real organizations and real people, whose perspective is being taken, what is being shown and what isn't being shown, what's missing, what feels like, and I think Bohemian Rhapsody is a great thing. It's just like, I don't that on that one, I'm like, I don't believe you.
Yeah.
I do not believe that. Whereas something like, we've talked about it before, something like Rocket Man, which feels, again, there are probably things that are being left out there. I wouldn't say, oh, this is 100% like non-filtered Elton John or whatever, but something like Rocket Man feels realer because it's actually going like, here's all the ways that this dude fucked up.
Yeah.
And all of the things that he should have done or that he shouldn't have done, etc., without making him a villain, again, not making him a villain or anything like that, but actually showing the complexity of it. And it feels like a much more honest film than Bohemian Rhapsody does, because there's this like, oh, you know, we went home to our families while everyone was partying, just like, you were rock stars in the 70s.
Yeah.
I do not believe you.
And there's no way any of you were sober when you recorded Night at the Opera. Yeah. Exactly.
Anyways, Karen, transition us to
so let's
our
talk
topic.
About kids.
Oh gosh, Christ. We're sorry,
we're
everybody.
We're not trying to make light of what we were just talking about, but really, how do you transition from that to talking about kindergarten movies? Yeah,
this was who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, I guess. Like, yes, this was a topic that we decided on a while ago. This was before we realized that we were going to be talking about these stories, so we're not making light of this at all.
It's unfortunate timing.
It is a little funny, but we're not making light of it.
No.
So to start with, we're actually only going to talk about two films this week, because we honestly could not think of a third one that we wanted to discuss.
Not that would work with this. Like, there's some other options, but it would have really brought the mood down.
Yes. So the first one we want to talk about is Kindergarten Cop, which, if you've not seen Kindergarten Cop, I pity you. I don't know how you've managed to go this far without having seen Kindergarten Cop. It is a 1990 American action comedy starring Arnold Schwarzenegger as an undercover police detective who winds up having to become a kindergarten teacher in order to like find the estranged wife and son of one of his suspects, who is like the worst human being ever. Cullen Crisp, played by wonderfully, actually played with absolute psychosis, played by Richard Tyson. This is a film that's directed by Ivan Reitman, which you'd forgotten about this, Karen. I only remembered because I watched Kindergarten Cop last year again, so it was on Hulu, and I was like, Ivan Reitman So that's but it's, I mean, what are your thoughts on Kindergarten Cop? This film is on the one hand problematic, and you kind of have to close one eye on certain parts, but it also is just so much fun, and it really showcases the fact that Schwarzenegger was a big star, but he was also very fucking charming on screen.
Yeah, that's one of the qualities that helps lead to him being elected governor of California, is because he does have this inherent charm and this ability to connect with people despite being this like giant scary looking dude, because he's bodybuilder and all that, and it's intimidating, but he has the softer side. And I feel like Kindergarten Cop, I was trying to think if there were earlier examples, and there probably are that I'm just forgetting, but it kind of created this little subgenre of these big action stars in these movies with children. So you have some with like Dwayne Johnson has done this, Vin Diesel, John Cena. So you have kind of this little subgenre of these movies where it seems like every big athlete, like wrestler, bodybuilder, whatever, who wants to get into acting at some point fairly early on, they're gonna have to do one of these movies to endear them to audiences. So and so Kindergarten Cop was one of those for Arnold Schwarzenegger. And one thing that I wanted to actually point out that has nothing to do with the movie itself, but there was an Academy Award winner in this cast and 2 Academy Award nominees when the movie came out. And since then, 2 additional people in this movie have gone on to be nominated for multiple Academy Awards, and they are absolutely not the people I would have thought would have been there. Do you have any guesses who they were?
Well, I would guess that Pamela Reed and Linda Hunt have some kind of awards.
So Linda Hunt had won an Oscar for supporting actress, I believe, in 1982. And then Pamela Reed had been nominated, as well as Kathy Moriarty.
I was going to say Kathy Moriarty, yeah.
So all 3 of them had come into this movie with history with the Oscars. But 2 other people, not them, eventually went on to one for acting and one for not acting.
Angela Bassett.
Yes, flight attendant, Angela Bassett. This is one of her first movies. And by the way, she was an Oscar nominee for Best Actress 3 years later. After playing a flight attendant in Kindergarten Cop, 3 years later, she's nominated for Best Actress for What's Love Got to Do with It. So crazy, right?
Yeah. Who's the other one?
That would be future Best Director nominee Jason Reitman, who plays the makeout kid in the...
I was wondering if that was him, actually, because he's got this like brief moment where he walks by, and I was just like, "Is that Jason Reitman?"
Sure
and I was trying to do the math in terms of ages, and I was just like, "Yeah, I think it works out." There you go. Yeah. Well, to go back to your initial point about like Schwarzenegger, I someone on Letterboxd, and I cannot remember who. If this was your review, I apologize. Like, I give you all the credit. Mentioned that one of the things that makes this film work is that softer side that Schwarzenegger is able to portray amazingly enough. And we don't think about Arnold Schwarzenegger as being like this great actor or anything. He has a limited range, but he was very good at choosing roles that showcase the range that he does have. And he does have a softness to him. Like, you believe him as like, oh, he's like this tough cop with the shotgun and the beard and like the overcoat and everything, and he's this total asshole. He definitely plays into that kind of Terminator element, right? And then he's completely cowed and confused and horrified by these little tiny children who he can't yell at in the same way that he yells at criminals, right? And doesn't know, like, and the first step that he manages to take in actually relating to them is to bust out his ferret.
Yeah.
Maybe a bad way of putting that, but to bring to bring like his pet ferret in, and it's just like, oh, look, an animal. You like animals, you must like animals, you're little tiny children. And to teach them about the ferret and, you know, all of the thing, and like, oh no, don't worry, he's not gonna bite, like all of that stuff. And then as the film goes on, you know, and you see this character who really does begin to enjoy himself and to really care about these kids and like these kids and show that sort of softness that is underneath this badass grizzled facade, as it were. And it works really, really well.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that they did well, and I credit Ivan Reitman for this, and also the screenwriters. I think one of the things that made this transition work, where he starts off like so overwhelmed, and then gradually becomes actually like really finds a way to connect with these kids and stuff, is that a lot of us who don't hate children, a couple of them are fine, but you throw me in a room with 25-year-olds and I'm going to be overwhelmed too. And so they really do a good job of like just making you feel that chaos of like, oh my gosh, I want to scream. So then when he screams, shut up, it's like so relatable, because it's like, yeah, these kids all need to shut up.
Well, and also I like the fact that it doesn't work, because they all burst into tears. Yeah, because you can't scream that at a bunch of little children, because they're feral. Children are feral at that age. They don't have a lot of self-control.
Right.
They don't have a lot of social skills, like not in the same way that slightly older children are going to have. And I like throughout the film, like he's warned by multiple people, like you are going to have difficulty with these kids, just like, oh, they're 5 years old, whatever, I deal with hardened criminals. And it's like, yes, but they're children. And they don't behave logically all the time, and they burst into tears for no reason, and they say inappropriate things. And if you turn your back on them for 5 seconds, they might burst into like insanity,
destroy everything.
And getting that back under control is really, really hard. I just to tell a story about my family. I recall at one point, one of my friends, when we were both very small, I had like a toy vacuum cleaner. And one of my friends, we were playing or whatever, and at some point he decided that he just wanted to toss the toy vacuum cleaner down the stairs. And my mother caught him and grabbed it, and her immediate response was, "That doesn't make sense." And at a minute later, this was a woman who already had a child. She was like, I can't believe that I just told like a 4-year-old child that something they're about to do does not make sense. Because of course it doesn't make sense. They're 4. Right. But you get that throughout this entire film of like, stop it. That does not make sense.
Yeah. Exactly.
Don't do that.
Oh, it's great. It's great. This movie is just, it's fun. It's funny. It's, but it's also, there are some things that, I mean, I wouldn't even say they didn't age well, because some parts of it weren't even really great in 1990 either. But I think one of the big, like, this it was acceptable in movies. It would have been unacceptable in real life. Like when he's chasing down the girlfriend of the guy that witnessed the murder in the very beginning of the movie, and he goes in and he's like shooting up this apartment and stuff, and it's like, yeah, for movie cops that was acceptable, but in real life that was never okay.
Yeah, it's definitely within that category of films like Die Hard, or even like Dirty Harry and stuff like that, where there are things that cops do that isn't acceptable, that isn't legal in any sense. Right. And it is that, just like, well, whatever it takes to get the job done kind of thing. One of the things that I do like is that where the film opens with that, and it opens with him being so tough, and he's just like, he's basically going to browbeat people into, agreeing to testify, et cetera. And it's the cause is good. We're going to put away this really dangerous criminal. Right. But it's not legal. It's not okay. And it's dangerous. But one of the things that does get revealed over the course of the film is him kind of beginning to pull back from that, and to realize that by his interaction with these small children, he can't just browbeat people into doing what he wants them to do. Right. And that underneath all of that really is this drive for, I want to stop people from getting hurt. And it is in a certain sense, it is definitely propaganda. In another sense, it's in terms of the character, it's a very sweet revelation. Like I love the sequence where he finds out that this one boy is who he thought could have been the son of this drug dealer is actually being abused. And that combination of like anger and sorrow to a certain degree of like realizing that this kid that he's been sort of targeting almost is in need of help, but in need of a very different kind of help than what he was looking for.
Right. Yeah.
And then he goes and he's just like, and it is very satisfying where he's like, you know, you hit the kid, I hit you. There is something just very like, that's so satisfying. Yeah, beat the shit out of this dude.
And I love that too when he gets pulled into the principal's office and she's like, yeah, we can't be doing that. But also, how did it feel?
Well, and I like his reaction as well, where he realizes he can't do this, right? That he is perfectly ready to beat the shit out of this dude.
Yeah.
And he punches him and then is like, I can't do this. The kids are watching me. The adults are watching me. I can't set this kind of an example for these small, we don't hit people. Right. And he apologizes to the principal even before she begins, you know, talking to him like, you can't do that. He says like, I'm sorry, I didn't know what else to do. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done this in front of the kids. There is like a character growth that's happening for Kimball, where he realized like, I can't just beat people up to get what I want. Even though I would really, really like to.
Yeah.
Because the kids look up to him, and that's part of it. The kids are looking at him going like, you know, how do we behave in the world? And you don't want to be the person who's just like, oh yeah, you just hit someone when you're mad.
Yeah, it ends up being this moment of like, oh, I have to set an example, like an actual real example. Yeah. Thoughts on Pamela Reed?
I love Pamela Reed in this. She is such a different kind of character. Like, you don't expect to see this kind of character. I love the fact that she spends the entire film eating. That the whole, like, she gets food poisoning or the flu or something. She's sick for days. Which is what winds up like pushing him into having to be the kindergarten teacher. And I like, she's a great foil, I think, for Schwarzenegger without like, there's a friendship between them. There's no like sexual tension. There's no like, you know, oh, he's a better cop or she's a better cop or anything. They just have very different approaches, and she's hilarious. And she gets a lot to do for this kind of character.
Yeah. I like that. Because she's supposed to be the substitute kindergarten teacher, but then she gets sick. And I like that they didn't just like cut her out. Like, okay, well, she's not available now, so we're just going to focus on him. Like, we still get a lot with her. We still get to see them as partners, him learning to have a partner. And she's just so funny too. Like the scene where they are at the restaurant, and they run into the other teacher and the kid that the teacher that he has a crush on, and she sees this immediately, like she recognizes it before he does, and just jumps in and just like, oh yeah, and she does this like whole character thing, and it's I love that scene. She's so great.
She's what, yeah, she pretends to be his sister, right? And does this like weird Austrian accent. She's like doing a version of Arnold Schwarzenegger, basically. It very much exploits, I think, the inherent humor of the situation. And like you said, they could have just written her out and been like, oh, she's not a character anymore, because the whole point was really to get Arnold Schwarzenegger into a classroom with kindergartners. Right. But they don't, and they actually give her something to do. They give her a role throughout the film, and a fiance who is a chef.
I would be so scared to be in a kitchen with him.
An accident-prone chef. But it's one of those where you're just like, yes, they're perfect for each other. Like, she just wants to eat and he just wants to cook.
Exactly. It's a match made in heaven.
Any other thoughts? This is a surprisingly violent film.
Yeah.
Like it gets, particularly the last sort of big shootout, which again, you know, talking about how films have maybe not aged well, you've got gunplay in the middle of a school, both cops and criminals, and it also contains the revelation that throughout this entire thing, Schwarzenegger has been wearing a gun on his ankle while he's teaching 5-year-olds. So that's a little distressing to watch. I do think that some of this is honestly just not aging well because of everything that has happened in the subsequent years. But even in 1990, there's a little bit of I guess it's a willing suspension of disbelief where you're just like, all right, I'm going to pretend that this is okay, basically.
Yeah. Like sure, the cop is armed. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, things definitely have changed in the world as far as like that stands out now as something not just that we dismiss, but like, oh, that actually is concerning. Yeah, it is surprisingly violent, but also like not like there's a lot of shooting, but there's not a lot of blood.
I think what's more distressing is that the character of Colin Crisp, played by Richard Tyson, who is absolutely psychotic, and I give Richard Tyson a great deal of credit for playing that to the hilt. I think that there's something just really terrifying about that, who's so obsessed with getting his son back that he's going to like kill people, that he's going to invade a kindergarten, that he's going to invade a school and
light it on fire.
Yeah, it's just very like, it isn't so much the gunplay itself, it's there's an intensity to the violence in that sequence that is disturbing, and it does kind of remind you this is not a kids movie, really. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger with a bunch of kids,
and
but it's not a kids movie. Yeah.
I don't really have anything else to add other than that I do still enjoy this movie all these years later. And also shout out to the Main Place Mall in Santa Ana, which I recognized immediately because it still looks like that.
So speaking of a movie that isn't a kids movie, even though it features kids.
Oh, very much not a kids movie.
Like more so even than Kindergarten Cop. Like, yeah.
This one's rated R.
Yeah, I do have to say, by the way, that I was not quite in kindergarten in 1990 when Kindergarten Cop came out, but I was in kindergarten the next year, so I was almost the same age as those little kids. Just to say that's how
I was born the same year as Jason Reitman, so I would have been the kid making out in the lounge.
I see.
I would probably not have made out with Jason Reitman, though.
So let's talk about Little Monsters. Little Monsters is a 2019 film that's kind of a hybrid of a whole bunch of things. It's a kids movie, it's a zombie movie, it's a post-apocalyptic movie, it's a rom-com. It is like I say, it is very much not a children's film, like really right from the beginning. So it tells the story of Dave, who is a sort of washed up musician who's broken up with his girlfriend, but is really not happy about anything. He is living with his sister and her son, and through a series of stupid decisions on his part, he decides that he's going to accompany his nephew on a field trip because he has a crush on his nephew's kindergarten teacher, played brilliantly by Lupita Nyong'o. And so they go on this trip to, I'm trying to remember the name of the place.
The Pleasant Valley Petting Zoo.
Yes. And of course, this is all taking place in Australia. So you know that already there are very few animals that you should be petting in Australia. Come on.
Yeah. Most of them will kill you.
And so this all culminates. They arrive at the petting zoo where they meet Teddy McGiggle.
McGiggles.
Played by Josh Gad, who's like a children's show host that all of the little kids are obsessed with. And and is actually a terrible human being, as we discover. And basically what happens is next door to the Pleasant Valley Petting Zoo is a testing facility for the US Army, and something has happened where a whole bunch of people are getting turned into zombies. So the zombies invade the petting zoo, and most of the second hour of the film is basically about Dave and Miss Carolyn trying to save the kids, get the kids out, and survive the incoming zombie apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
It's an odd film. I actually have very mixed feelings about this film, because I think some of it works really, really well, especially when we get to the zombies and kids.
Yes.
But the first half hour is basically Dave fucking up his own life and working very hard to fuck up other people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts on this film, Karen?
And I agree. So I actually saw this movie at Sundance back in 2019, and I loved it after about the first 25 minutes. Like when it becomes like a movie of these kids at the petting zoo, it's cute, and then when it turns into a zombie movie, it's great. It's so funny. It's thrilling, and Lupita Nyong'o is just the best and needs to be in more movies. But yeah, when this opening like setup, all this build up to how Dave ends up at this field trip in the first place was just so unnecessary. I really wish the movie had been about her. Like, I wish that she had been the main character of the story, because she's great. It's a fantastic character. I mean, she got a ukulele and sings Taylor Swift songs and wears a bright yellow dress, and she's just sunny and light and so positive and warm, and loves these children and takes her job of protecting them very, very seriously. And she, through, illness and stuff, ends up with this idiot who just wants to hit on her the whole time. And he's not an interesting character. I think Alexander England does a good job playing the character, but the character himself sucks. And I just wish that there had been less of a focus on him.
Yeah, watching it this time, and in fact, I remember seeing it for the first time and being like, why is this guy here? Like, I thought that this was just Lupita Nyong'o and a bunch of kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rewatching it this time, I think that because I was prepared for it, I was a little bit more interested in the character. But yeah, I had the same reaction, just like, why aren't we just finding out about who Miss Carolyn is? And then, you can introduce the Dave character partway through, being like, oh, this guy who's like the fuck up. Right. Or even if you want to make it into more of a rom-com situation, kind of show both of them, of their lives, what he's doing, what she's doing, etc., and then have them both come together to go on this field trip, and then this turns into a zombie comedy. In some ways, it's almost you can almost read it as misdirection, I guess, is that in the sense that it's set up like this rom-com where you've got this dude who's a fuck up and this very competent woman, and they're gonna fall in love and he's gonna grow, etc. And then it takes this left turn into zombies. Right. But yeah, the fact is, the most interesting part is Miss Carolyn and her kids, and then the zombies. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it has this lack of balance. But when we do actually get into the zombies, it's loads of fun.
Oh yeah, it's really fun. It's great. I know there's some mixed feelings about this, but I actually really liked Josh Gad's Teddy McGiggle character, who is just this absolute asshole who hates children and has just continued to do the job because he's just trying to sleep with their moms. Obviously, I don't like that, but I think that he does a good job with it. And I think that this guy who ends up in this situation and basically just wants to just hide out until he can be rescued, and just isn't willing to save these kids, but ultimately ends up needing to be saved too before it goes badly for him. But I think that there's some really interesting things that they do with that character, and I think Josh Gad does a good job with it too. So I actually liked that as well. I know some people found him, I mean, he is irritating. He's supposed to be irritating. But I thought it was in a way that worked.
Well, yeah, I think you have to have those kinds of obstacles that aren't just the zombies, right? You have to have characters who are just going to be out for themselves. and are not going to care about other people, that you need that little addition of kind of human reaction.
And it's always going to be the Americans.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Or Josh Gad,
or Josh Gad. Yeah. But I also love like some of the little comments about from the army people of like, oh, the zombie outbreak again. I can't shoot children again. Like, geez, what the fuck have you guys been doing?
It's been a crazy time. I also like there's in the introduction, kind of when the zombies begin breaking out, there's this whole conversation between two soldiers about oh, I'm in, it sucks to be in like this new place and I don't get to see anything. Did you know? And then there's this listing of like all of the things in Australia that can kill you.
Right.
Like all of the different animals and spiders and
the jellyfish
and like, here are all of the, and I like that kind of becomes this thing. It's just like, oh, and now the zombies. Now the
Americans brought.
Yeah. Now that there's the zombies in Australia, so that can kill it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good little, and it's true. I mean, sorry, Australians, everything in your country can kill people. I don't like, that seems to be a thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's just how it is, but we don't need to add to that problem. But I think one of the things that I really do just love and that make this movie what it is, it's Lupita Nyong'o and her commitment to this role as this kindergarten teacher who there's a scene where she gives some backstory about how she ended up in that job in the first place, and it wasn't her intention. She didn't like go to school to become a teacher. She kind of fell into it, and it turned out to be something that she loved. And because of her commitment and her warmth and her love of these children, that's ultimately what gets them through this really scary situation. And she manages to, for a while, she manages to convince them this is a game. It's not anything to be scared of. And she doesn't lose a single one.
Well, and it's that understanding of like, you need to not just like physically protect the children, but if they emotionally, if they know too much, they might lose it. They might really endanger themselves because they're little kids. It's tough enough for the adults who have some degree of self-control, right?
Right.
But little kids at that age, there's a very fine line between self-control and total meltdown.
Yeah.
And I think the film, actually both films that we're talking about, balances that really well. It shows these kids not just as being cute, but as being like, innocent and also just close enough to going feral at any moment. And that's where some of the tension lies.
Yeah. And I like that she there's even that scene, I think it's with Dave, where she's saying like, listen, yeah, we're scared, but they need to feel like we know what we're doing. Like we're in charge and we've got them and we're going to protect them. So I also love the moment where she has to go get the insulin, or the EpiPen for the one kid. And she has to go out through a field of zombies, and she comes back and her beautiful yellow dress is just covered in blood and goo. It's like, this woman is the way she like falls out of the like jumps out of the ceiling, like when she comes back into the building, like this woman is a badass. I love her. She's the best.
Yes. So generally, what do we think? What makes films like this work? So both of these films are actually very adult films. They're not for small children. They're not directed towards small children, but they both work, and they don't work by being too cutesy or I guess treating these kids in a certain sense both like, not, I don't want to say like adults, but like fully autonomous human beings.
Yeah.
Right. But also recognizing that they need to be protected and kept safe, even though they're sometimes dealing with very scary adult things, and they need to understand who's on their side and who isn't.
Yeah. Well, and I think also too, you get to see those moments where kids can go from infuriating to adorable and back again, and how that can work within these dangerous situations too. I think that they do a good job with that, because anybody who is around kids, even if you don't have children, Anybody who's been around kids at all can relate to this, and it makes it a lot easier to watch. Like if a kid is too annoying all the time or too cute and adorable all the time, then it really makes the movie just not work because it's not relatable. You have to have that mix of both.
Yeah, and all of the kids in both of these films are very funny. And they're good child actors. And I think you can often spot when a kid is just not very good at that age. And all of them, it's that, I think you're right, it's that balance between cuteness and incredibly annoying. And that's like, as a childless person, that is what kids are to me. They're just like, oh, aren't you adorable? Fuck off. Like you're now you're annoying me. Like, go back to your mom. Like you stopped being cute now.
Yeah.
But they're illogical and they're also can be very penetrating and like intelligent. It's just like, I see what you're doing there, adult person. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Or even they'll just say things that they don't really fully understand what they're saying, but it's so insightful and it can be really just like, wow, I've never thought about it that way. It's the way that they look at the world is a lot of fun usually.
I do like it in Kindergarten Cop, the one kid who keeps on standing up to say, boys have a penis and girls have a vagina. Just like, good, thank you. Good to know.
Yep. There's always one. Yeah. Well, and that kid in particular, part of the reason he keeps doing it is because every time he does, he gets a reaction.
Yeah. And also that's the kid whose dad is a gynecologist, I think. Right. So he knows things. He's learned things.
Yep.
So any final thoughts about these two films?
Just that they're both totally watchable and you should watch them.
Yes.
Tubi, but I think it's leaving at the end of the month.
Yeah, Kindergarten Cop is on Tubi. It will be gone in 9 days. It is one of those films that shows up on a lot of different streaming services. So I have a feeling it will be in a different place.
Probably. Yeah. Little Monsters is on Hulu.
Yes. Yeah. Little Monsters is on Hulu. So both of them very, very available to watch and very entertaining films as well.
The last thing I want to say about Little Monsters is I love Josh Gad's line delivery. Frogsy didn't make it. It cracks me up every time.
Well, I do have to say about that character and about the whole thing is there are definitely shows like that exist.
Oh yeah.
That are absolute catnip to children and that are the most grating, terrible thing to adults. And like I'm sorry to my parents who had to watch some of that shit with me. Ad nauseum. Right. Yeah. And there are shows that are just like that. Like I've seen some of my younger relatives where just like, what the fuck is this? Like, why? Why?
Yeah. And I like to imagine that some of the people on those shows are also, might be nursing a drinking problem.
I think that there's like that fantasy for when adults watch those shows, just like, this is so annoying. I have to like project some kind of terrible thing onto this just to make it bearable.
Yep. It's true.
So I think that's going to close us out for this week.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for listening. We are going to be doing a bonus episode on A Haunting in Venice. So definitely watch out for that. And that will be available to all of our lovely patrons, who include Ali, Brian, Connor, Estefania, Heather, James, Judy, Karen, Carriata, Lauren, Matt, Michelle, Monty, Nanina, Robert, Steve, Sharon, and Tao. Thank you again so much for continuing to support us, guys. If you would like to join their number, we are on Patreon. That's patreon.com/citizendame, and you will get that bonus episode and also some fun little merch things. And you'll also get to support us and keep us posted and continuing to talk about movies like this forever.
Yes.
We also have our Zazzle store, zazzle.com/Citizen Dame Pod, and a Ko-Fi account, ko-fi.com/Citizen Dame. We are on the web at citizendamepod.com, where you can also read other reviews and editorials and other fun things. And if you want to get in touch with us, we have our email. That's citizendamepod@gmail.com. We are on various social medias, definitely moving rapidly off of Twitter because it is having a complete existential breakdown. But we are kind of still on there. That's at Citizen Dame Pod. And we are also on Instagram at Citizen Dame Pod. And you can follow us on Blue Sky, Citizen Dame Pod at bluesky.social. That's definitely, in terms of more of the social medias, that is definitely the place to follow us now, as well as Instagram. And we have an HQ on Letterboxd at Citizen Dame, and you can find links to all of our articles, lists of movies that we've been watching, and an ongoing list of all of the films that we talk about, so that you can check those out and also leave us your thoughts on everything. So please do follow us on Letterboxd, especially if you've been used to getting stuff from us on Twitter. Just please start following those other socials, because Twitter's terrible. And it's getting worse. I'm sorry, Twitter, whatever the hell it's called now.
Shitter. You pronounce the X like a sh.
Twitter. And of course, you can get in touch with us individually. I am on all of the various socials at LH Business. Karen, where are you?
I am at Karen M. Peterson.
And that will close us out for this week. We will be back next week talking about more high school movies and easing into spooky season. Yay!
Yeah, we're doing high school horror next week, right?
Yes. Also my birthday. Woo!
Woohoo!
Yay! Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to y'all next time.
Bye.
You kids are soft. You lack discipline. Well, I've got news for you. You are mine now. You belong to me. You're not gonna have your mommies run behind you anymore and wipe your little tushes. Oh, no. It's time now to turn this mush into muscles. No more complaining. No more Mr. Kimball have to go to the bathroom. Nothing. There is no bathroom. Now, the first thing the deputy trainees have to learn is to freeze whenever you hear this. Now, the next time you hear this whistle, each one of you get one toy. How many? One! Good, and bring it back to the carpet. Pronto. Ready? Wait for it. Wait for it. Sit down. Ready? Go, quickly. Get your toy. Go for it. Yes, very fast. Good, quickie. Bring the toy back. Bring the toy back to the carpet. Bring it back to the carpet. Quick. Back to the carpet. Quickie. Emma, take your toy back to the carpet.
I'm not a policeman. I'm a princess.
Take your toy back to the carpet.
I'm not a policeman. I'm a princess.
Take it back!